Welcome to the Disability Awareness and Intervention Echo. My name is Janelle Preston. I am the project coordinator over our Project Echoes here at the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice. We're thrilled to have you join our session today. As you noticed, we are recording today's session. We use that for educational and quality improvement purposes. So by participating in this session, you're consenting to be recorded. We just want to let you guys know that. So if you want to hit the leave button, you can disconnect from the session, but we hope that you'll just stay and enjoy this session. We love interactions and participation, and how we have that happen over Zoom is if you want to put your questions into chat or your comments into chat, we'll make sure that those get answered for you. We also encourage and love to get case studies. That's a great way to learn from everybody on the call about a case that we're working on or a family that we're interacting with. So if you would be interested in doing that, reach out to the Disability Echo at usu.edu and we will get you set up on the schedule for that. We do talk about sensitive topics on our echo sessions, so please remember to de-identify any information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to a hub member. They have an asterisk or will now have an asterisk in front of their name so that they are easier to find in chat. And if you're unsure of anything, please reach out to one of us. If you've never joined an echo session, welcome to your first one. We have a couple of components of an echo session. The first one is that we have a subject matter expert. So today we're really lucky to be hearing from Jocelyn Christensen from the Utah Parent Center about receiving a diagnosis and what's next after that. And then we have a case presentation where we go into small breakout groups, and everybody on the call has knowledge and expertise or resources that many of us don't know about. So sharing that information about the case and having some feedback and discussion around it. And that's how we build that professional networking. I don't know if many of you are like me. Sometimes since I am an early intervention provider, I am driving around in my car. And sometimes that feels like I'm doing that by myself. And so by joining and hearing from everybody gets me that connection. So I know that I can reach out to Chris Evans because she shared something fantastic in a small breakout room. And I want to know something more about that. And we're on opposite ends of the state. She's down in southern Utah. I'm up here in northern Utah. But just another way to connect with each other. If you can take a minute and rename your profile, again, it just builds that networking that we hope to continue to have over this virtual world. Some ways to raise your hand or do your react button. You can do that at the bottom of your Zoom screen with your tabs. Session etiquette. So just remember to raise your hand or use the chat feature to ask your questions. Take a minute to introduce yourself. We love having the cameras on so we can see each other on the screen versus presenting to just black screens. But we know that sometimes you're eating lunch and don't want to have everybody see you eating. So we just encourage that. We do also have a survey, and thank you to everybody who fills out those surveys. We're able to take that information and share that with our funders to share all the amazing things these ECHO projects do, as well as we take the feedback that you guys give us in those surveys and can change the ECHO series and session around things that you guys are interested in hearing about it too. So thank you to everybody who fills those out. Throughout today's session, Leo will be dropping the survey link, and you will also get it after the session. Canvas is where we store everything. So if you would like access to the Canvas page, you can email disabilityecho@usu.edu and we will get you access to that. It's where we store the recordings, the PowerPoints, handouts, the case recommendations that everybody talks about are free for everybody to download. Just another plug for those case studies. Again, it's a great way to hear and get information from all of you that are on the call. So if you are interested in doing that, please email us and we will get you set up on the schedule. If you've not taken a minute, we do have social media and you're free to follow us. We share resources that are shared with us, things about all of the ECHO networks here at the Institute, as well as anything that is shared with us. And they're just really some great information. We'd love to have you follow us. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to Jocelyn. Oh, Jocelyn, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Can everyone see okay and hear?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right. Okay, so just a note before I get started, my presentation is actually adapted from a support group that we have here at the Utah Parent Center, but all of the information is applicable. I know there's lots of professionals here today. It's applicable for you as well as families or anyone who works in the disability community and who wants to learn more. And as we learned together today, the presentation will have some scannable QR codes on some pages, and we can also drop some of those resources in the chat for you to have later. The websites to these links also have the choice to switch languages if you need the materials in Spanish. Okay, so let me just start by introducing myself. I'm Jocelyn. I'm a parent consultant here at the Utah Parent Center, and I'm a mom to 3 amazing kids. Their names are Flynn, Francie, and Sylvie. And my oldest, Flynn, is my reason for being here. He has a rare diagnosis called Phelan-McDermid syndrome and an autism diagnosis. And he's a really amazing kid and the inspiration behind all the work that I do. So I work specifically with Utah Family Voices project within the Utah Parent Center. We help families navigate healthcare, resources, and support systems so children and youth can live healthy and connected lives at home and in their communities. And we also provide parent-to-parent support as we're all parents to a child with a disability here. And the Utah Parent Center has other amazing projects that help families with school, which is our PTI and LEA teams, transition to adulthood, which is called Transition University, and sexual health and safety, which is our Tetons program. We're a nonprofit organization, so all of our services and classes are free, and we help all individuals and families with a disability throughout their entire lifespan. So, how do we help families navigate a new life-changing diagnosis? When a child is diagnosed with a disability or special healthcare need, families may face a time of uncertainty while they learn about the diagnosis, and sometimes beyond that. It can be a really stressful and emotional time. Many parents report feeling anger, sadness, disappointment, fear, denial, guilt, grief, and a lack of control when their child receives a diagnosis. And at the same time, diagnosis can also come as a relief. The child can receive the right care for their condition, and parents can understand a little more about what makes their child tick and how best to help them. Sometimes a diagnosis can also feel like limbo when a family is waiting for treatment and doesn't understand how to move forward. No matter what emotions a family might experience, it's important to know that all feelings are valid and normal. So my personal experience with Flynn's diagnosis was twofold. The first came at age 4, he received his autism diagnosis. And with this, it actually took a few years for me to not feel sad whenever I thought about his diagnosis because I was so afraid for his future and all the unknowns of his adult life. And to kind of deal with this, I dove headfirst into all the therapies that I could, all the financial resources I could find to get those therapies, and lots of driving near and far to get him the best help possible. And when he was 10 years old, he got the Phelan-McDermid syndrome diagnosis, and I struggled a lot more with this one. This diagnosis brought up new fears and worries that I had never considered before, like medical issues, seizures, and the risk of regression. And it took me almost a full year to feel like I could feel happy again after this diagnosis. I was fully grieving and struggled to sleep. I spent tons of time researching his condition and diving into the nitty gritty of the biology and the genetics to better understand it, and honestly, feeling really angry and sad. Eventually, I did what I do best and I dealt with my grief by taking action. My husband and I were able to take Flynn to see a specialist in New York who met him, did a lot of testing, and answered all of our questions. And eventually, peace and acceptance came. I was able to see how well he was doing, let go of my fear around his diagnosis, and just focus on my son and the beautiful person that he is. All of this is to say that each child's diagnosis is unique and each parent is going to react differently. We're going to go over a list of the top 10 helpful things um, to focus on after receiving a diagnosis and a bunch of supportive resources. The QR code on this page is linked to an article from the National Parent Center Hub called You Are Not Alone, and it's written by a parent about recently learning of their child's diagnosis. So let's move on to our top 10 list. So, having a child receive a medical or disability diagnosis is super overwhelming. As a professional, a friend, fellow parent, or support person, allow time in these conversations for the parents to just take a breath. I always remind the family that the most important thing is right there in front of them, their child, the same child as before the diagnosis, a child that they love and who needs them. Putting this into perspective can often help families when the diagnosis feels all encompassing. These pictures are simple breathing exercises you can practice at any time. And the QR code here takes you to a 2-minute mindful breathing exercise that can be used for adults or for kids. Okay, so language for medical professionals can be really confusing for parents as well, especially when they have no background knowledge of the condition. Families should be encouraged to learn, advocate, and ask questions. Sometimes a follow up appointment can be helpful so they have time to gather information and form questions without the shock. For medical providers, explain in clear, simple, person forward language what is happening and take the time to clarify if needed. It's helpful to have handouts with information or tools for parents to write information down so they can reference it later. It's also really helpful to have recommendations for things parents can read to learn more about their child's condition on their own. And I have a link here for medical acronyms as well. When I spoke to the genetic counselor about Flynn's Phelan-McDermid's diagnosis, she was so kind and patient with me. She scheduled another call with me later so we could talk about it more after I had done some of my own research. And ultimately, the most helpful thing she did was refer me to the Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation, where I was able to talk to many kind and knowledgeable parents and professionals, sign up for research studies for Flynn, and read articles on the condition. So for parents, speaking to peers is sometimes much more comfortable. So it's helpful to refer them to places they can go to ask questions to other parents in similar situations. And the Utah Parent Center is a really great resource for this. But there's also diagnosis-centered support groups, both in person or online, that can also be very helpful. And speaking of the internet, it's very common for parents of children who have just received a diagnosis to immediately start searching for information on their child's condition. Learning about your child's diagnosis is useful, and the internet is full of good information, but there's bad information out there too that can be detrimental or even harmful to families. So it's so important to have quality, factual resources ready for families and also to be prepared to discuss common misunderstandings and fears that parents might have once they start Googling. I definitely myself have spent far too much time researching my son's diagnosis on the internet. Some of the information was really helpful, and some fueled my fear and anxiety. For parents, it can be really difficult to distinguish the truth. And this slide outlines what we tell parents at the Utah Parent Center to look out for in their internet research. And then there's a couple of links to drop in the chat. The QR code for this slide takes you to a page from Medical Home Portal Archives for more information on finding quality information and resources. So people with disabilities need medical and educational support to make sure they receive the therapies and interventions that will best help them reach their potential. A diagnosis can provide a path to that support. Here are resources in the state of Utah that every person with a diagnosed disability should get in contact with. So each state has a Family Voices or Family to Family Health Information Center and a PTI, Parent Training and Information Center. Generally, these organizations will be able to address all the individual resources and support that someone might need. Here in Utah, we have the Utah Parent Center and Utah Family Voices under one roof, which is very convenient. If you contact us at UFB or the UPC, we will work with you to find the resources you need, or we can refer you to someone who can better assist you. We can help families navigate the systems of services that will make the most sense for their situation. There are a lot of confusing acronyms in this world, and we can help families understand them and the next steps to take. We do parent consultations in person or over the phone, and we also have dedicated Spanish consultations and language translation available. Next, we have the Integrated Services Program, which is part of the Bureau for Children with Special Healthcare Needs within the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. The Integrated Services Program assists families of children and youth who have special healthcare needs by facilitating direct clinical services, care coordination, transition to adulthood, and advocating for primary care and comprehensive health care. And then I have some links to drop in the chat for Utah Family Voices, Utah Parent Center PTI team, and integrated services. For really young children, there are programs that connect to early intervention providers and the school district. Some of these providers have wait lists, so I always encourage families not to hesitate to make the call. If you run into any problems, you can call us at Utah Family Voices or the Utah Parent Center to see if we can help find providers, connect with school, or anything else. And Help Me Grow is another resource that provides links to self-assessments and milestone tools. So in the chat, we have Baby Watch links, early intervention info links, Help Me Grow, and the Autism Services Locator, which is a big resource that we send out to a lot of our families with a child with autism. Financial difficulties and lack of medical coverage is a huge issue for families with children with special healthcare needs. Help can sometimes come through state and government programs, and we'll just quickly go over a couple of these resources. Please reach out to the Utah Parent Center to obtain more information about these Medicaid waivers if you need it. So a Medicaid waiver does essentially two things. It waives the parent's income. If the child with a disability is under 18, eligibility is based off the individual's income. And number two, it waives the individual's need to be in an institution or nursing facility. These Medicaid waivers allow our children and loved ones to live in their own home and community just like everyone else. The Division of Services for People with Disabilities, also known as DSPD, promotes opportunities and provides support for people with disabilities to lead self-determined lives by overseeing home and community-based services for more than 6,500 people who have disabilities. Support includes community living, day services, and supported employment services. DSPD houses many Medicaid waivers, but the most utilized waiver is the Community Supports Waiver. And this waiver does have a waiting list that is about 7 to 12 years long, but it serves the individual with a disability for the rest of their life. We encourage families to get onto the waiting list as soon as possible because of this wait, and to let our legislators know how many people are truly needing this service. Next, we have the Medically Complex Children's Waiver, or the MCCW. It's also a Medicaid waiver that helps children with medical complexities. The eligibility is pretty specific. The child has to be under 18 to be on the waiver. The child has to have 3 or more organ systems involved in the disability, see 3 or more specialty physicians on a regular basis, and be developmentally behind same age peers. And this waiver will last until the child turns 19. And then we have the tech dependent waiver, which is designed to provide the choice of community alternatives for technology dependent individuals who would otherwise require placement in a Medicaid nursing facility. Waiver services help promote individuals to remain in their homes or other community based settings. To be eligible for this waiver, you have to be under 21, meet admission criteria for nursing facility care, require skilled nursing or rehabilitative services at least 5 days per week, and be dependent on one or more of the following: a ventilator, a BiPAP, CPAP, trach, or central line for nutrition or meds. So every family should get on these waiting lists. At some point, parents might feel desperate or unable to care for their child, and for that, this kind of support is absolutely vital. There are also certain rights and responsibilities for students and individuals with disabilities that may apply to a child as they grow. A few to be aware of are the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, and Section 504 of the ADA. The Utah Parent Center has parent consultants that have not only been through these processes personally, but have also learned about the laws related to the school systems each year. They can help work with the child's IEP team to make sure an IEP is being followed and appropriate accommodations are being made. And then for the links in the chat, we just have links to the ADA, Section 504, IDEA, and the PTI team at the Utah Parent Center. Another thing to consider when there is a child with a disability in a family is that legal issues like divorce, custody, guardianship, and trust must be handled with careful consideration of the child and how they will be affected. Please contact Utah Family Voices for help for resources to dive deeper into things parents may need to consider. And I've just included some links on laws to know, estate planning, trusts and accounts, guardianship, and divorce. Raising a child can be really stressful. A life-changing disability diagnosis on top of that can sometimes be more than parents can bear. We always encourage parents to care for themselves. So, can everyone just type into the chat really fast, like what things you do to take care of yourself? Because I need ideas, and I think everybody could use more ideas. So I just learned that self-care is something that we need to do, but don't necessarily want to do. So for me, I go for a walk. It clears my head and calms me down. I see I'm not the only one. Walk or hiking, mahjong, I love that. Yoga, fingernails, sleep. That's a good one. We all need more of that. Gardening. Oh, these are all so lovely. Connecting with friends and family. Um, oh, lip buzzing. That's interesting. Watching a show. Love it. Reading. Yes. Um, so we all practice self-care, but we could all probably, practice a little more self-care because life is hard, and it's especially hard when you have a child with a difficult diagnosis. Um, I also think taking care of yourself is about surrounding yourself with supportive and loving people. So, part of our work here at the Utah Parent Center is collecting resources and building a village for families that don't have that support. And sometimes it's just a listening ear from someone who understands and doesn't judge. but we also help connect parents to programs and support systems that can help them help their child. Self-care looks different for everyone, and every parent should have the ability to take a break and make sure their needs are met so that their child can be cared for as well. And then I just have a couple links for caregiver mental health resources. So, the stress of finding care and support for a disabled family member can cause cracks in partnerships and leave other children feeling left behind and forgotten. Disability affects the whole family, and individuals react differently. While one parent might jump into learning new things, seeking care, and fully accepting this new life, the other might withdraw, become depressed, or feel stuck. Parents should share their thoughts and feelings about the diagnosis with each other, as well as the information they learn. Help each other to understand the diagnosis and how to talk about it with others. It's important to help families understand that the diagnosis is nobody's fault. It does not change the person that is their son, daughter, brother, or sister. And the siblings need attention too and need parents to help them feel that the diagnosis is not taking over their family life. Taking care of the family is just as important as taking care of the child with special health care needs. So, for me personally, Flynn's mini therapies and appointments have been hard sometimes to navigate for my family. My daughter has changed schools twice to accommodate his needs, and she had to start all over again with new friends and a new school. We were honest with her about what was happening, and we let her make the choice of whether or not she wanted to change schools, and she chose the school closer to her brother. Despite the difficulties, my kids do have a genuine friendship and love for each other that my husband and I try to foster whenever we can, but obviously there's bumps that come up. Sometimes one or more will voice feeling left out or lonely. I found that each of my children do need quality time with my husband or me to help them feel how valued and special each of them are to our family. So, here at the Utah Parent Center, we have the Sibling Project. They have amazing resources and tip sheets about how to care for siblings. The page on the screen is all about sibling information needs. We also host sibling support groups or SIB shops at the Utah Parent Center. Each month, the project hosts different activities for different age groups. They post them at the beginning of each month, and the space is limited. So families need to register fast if they'd like to participate. These are meant to be a safe place for kids who have siblings with disabilities to be able to talk freely, vent, and just have a break from their sibling. Self-advocacy is so important, and starting early to help children understand their diagnosis is vital. Talking plainly about their condition in an age-appropriate manner and discussing things that might help them, like medications, a quiet place to rest, not being touched, etc., demonstrates how to be a self-advocate and can be very helpful to them in the long run. Always presume competence when speaking to a child or person with a disability, regardless of their ability to communicate. Speak positively in ability first language and emphasize their strengths. Everybody has them. Teaching can happen at all levels, and it is great if a child can explain or have someone help them explain their condition without feeling embarrassed or that they do not understand it for themselves. I know that I deeply appreciated the professionals in my son's life who grew to love and care for him. These professionals celebrated his accomplishments and seemed genuinely happy to see him, would speak to him as though he understood, and would listen for his answers even before he became fully verbal. They established a relationship of trust and respect and were key figures in his growth and development. I genuinely feel these people helped him establish a very healthy level of advocacy and confidence that has still carried over into his teen years. And like many others in my situation, I've also had negative experiences with providers and professionals. These included a medical professional emphasizing my son's deficits right in front of him, like he couldn't understand them, or using disparaging words like annoying while describing his behavior and assessments. Please be so mindful of the language you use about our children. It impacts them and it also impacts their parents. And then just for our links for this, I have tips for teens, and resources for self-advocacy. And last, remember what's important. Some parents say a new diagnosis is a roller coaster, and that's sometimes true, but it can also be a time to cherish your child. A new diagnosis isn't the end of the world, even though it may feel like it. It's the beginning of a new world. And diagnosis leads to more knowledge and greater understanding and empathy for that child, which is always a good thing. The best way to help families is to be supportive and kind. Listen and answer questions. Support is there. Next Steps is a free parent to parent support group for parents of newly diagnosed children run by the Utah Parent Center. This support group is held virtually once a month. If you know of any families who are struggling with a new diagnosis, please send them our way and we can help them through it. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Jocelyn. That was really great and a great reminder to all of us on the call of those 10 steps. I liked how you broke that down. I'm going to leave it up. Okay, there's a question on here. How does the Medicaid waiver work for non-residential?
Are you talking about the community supports waiver through DSPD? It is highly individualized, which is what is so great about the program. So once someone is off the wait list and they receive services through DSPD, caseworker that kind of helps decide what kind of services are best for that particular individual. And so if it's a child living at home with parents under 18, that could be caregiver compensation, that could be respite care. It just kind of depends on the individual, but it's once you're off the wait list and you're into services, you kind of get the services that you need, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Abby Lynn, if you had a different question or you want a follow-up, you can come off mute.
Yes. So she's asking if you have to be on the DSPD list to get services, and yes, you have to be on the DSPD wait list and then come off of the wait list into services. Yeah, it can include. Yeah, that's right. Gretchen saying it can include therapies. Yeah, it includes Medicaid coverage. It includes therapies. I believe it can even help with like transportation to medical appointments and therapies as well. It's very highly individualized.
Always the lovely awkward pause on Zoom. I'm going to pause for a few more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, she's asking if there's anything for people on the wait list while they're waiting. Yes, sometimes. Sometimes there is temporary funding for people on the wait list. They usually get just like a lump sum that they have to use within a certain amount of time to be used for caregiver compensation or respite or whatever they might need. So it's definitely worth it, even though the wait list is super long. It's definitely worth it to get on the wait list.
Could you talk a little bit more about that, Jocelyn, the DSPD waitlist, and why it's important for families to get on there early, even though they may not need that at that particular moment?
Yes. So we always encourage, when I talk to families, The paperwork for DSPD is very intimidating. And so a lot of people do wait to get on either because they don't know about it or because they just don't have the bandwidth to do the paperwork. But when someone comes off of services into DSPD, the time that they've spent waiting is taken into consideration. So the longer you've waited, the better your chances of getting services. So getting in earlier is definitely better. Like for my son, he's turning 14. We've been on for almost 10 years. And he's still on the wait list. Um, and so earlier is better if we can do that. Sorry, Janelle, what was the other part of your question?
Just like why it's important to start to talk to families about that, even if, like, if I've said I'm in early intervention, and oftentimes
Right,
families are like, I'm good right now. But
right.
like
Yes.
Eric's saying, if they'll never get on the wait or to the top of a wait list if they're not even on the wait list.
Exactly. And I think also when a child's in early intervention, we don't necessarily know what their prognosis is going to be. So DSPD is a really good just in case for families. Like, you don't know if your child, when they're an adult, is going to need supported living or residential treatment. And DSPD is one of the only ways to help pay for that. Like a lot of places won't even take self pay. And so it's really important for families to get their child um, on the wait list. And yes, Gretchen brought up that it shows lawmakers an accurate number. I talk to families every day who have never heard of DSPD, and some of them have adult children. And right now, I think there's like 7,000 people waiting on the DSPD wait list. But there are tons more who actually should be on it. And so if lawmakers see that there's a high need, then they might be better about funding it every year, which has been a problem in the past.
And then Myrna, you've had your hand up.
Yes, I actually wanted to make a comment, just what we've been talking about. I was there earlier this year during the legislative sessions, and DSPD, of course, were talking to a lot of the our legislators and trying to push because of the wait list. And I just happened to be waiting for, to talk to him about early intervention. But heard a story that he shared that he had a neighbor who was on the wait list, and anyways, he was kind of surprised why this family had not gotten there, like where they were. So he got a release in order to be able to kind of get more involved and try to really understand what's going on with the system a little bit deeper. And something that he found was that just a lot of the questions or the way the parent had responded wasn't really showing the urgent need that this family had. And so, he was just kind of talking. There was a lot of women there, mostly women. There were some men as well, but he's like, you moms, you guys are super moms. You're really managing things and you're doing things. And sometimes you're not being willing to be vulnerable and really share how hard your life really is, because you really want to have things under control, and you like to believe, that things are going to be better or that I can do all of this, which he's like, you guys are. However, you're not really then showing how much you need this, and so it's kind of like an interesting thing that he, was pointing out, which it really stuck to me just with the field that I'm in, about how sometimes it's so important, we always talk about parents to advocate, and I think it's really being disclosing things. And one of the reasons is that he was aware that the couple was having marital problems. Like I mean, it was literally like causing so much strain in this family's life. And none of that was mentioned, in some of the questions. It's like, oh, well, anyway, I just kind of wanted to share that because that really, again, has really stuck with me, and just how important it is that we let families know how open they have to be when they are reaching out for these resources and talking to people and seeking support, and even in their application process, that they are very specific of how hard and challenging their life is because it is the wait list. It's not always necessarily in order. It's not like a first come, first serve. They really take in that information and will, just based on what the responses are, kind of almost assign a placement of where you're going to fall on that list. And if you're not sharing just how hard your life really is, then you're going to be placed exactly in that spot, where it looks like you're actually managing things. Help would be great, but, where you really have to do that. So anyways, I thought this would be an appropriate place to share that as we work with a lot of these families.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Myrna, that you mentioned. And I think that's everything, right? Like Jocelyn, you were talking about being careful about how we talk to families and individuals. And I think that's true. We need to be positive, but we also need to talk about, I hate to say, the deficit side of things, because I think that that's a key thing that you're just saying, Myrna, is what is it impacting the whole family on from all aspects of it. And like Gretchen is saying, not all caseworkers are responsive. It's kind of that same thing. Not all educators are, you're going to have pleasant experiences with too. So great
Right.
comments and questions.
Yeah, I always tell all of our families to, when they're filling out the paperwork, be honest but severe and fill out the questions like it's your child's worst day. Because some days are better than others, right? But they need to know about the worst day, not the best ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, one more minute for questions. Okay, I know that wasn't a minute, but I'm going to move on and go over our case discussion today. So this, as we're thinking about this, it is probably going to, all of us have had experience with this, most likely. So this is a family, and I want you to just kind of think about one that's maybe on your caseload or that you've worked with. Because I'm from early intervention, my experiences are always from that world, from Part C early intervention. So this team is supporting a young child with developmental delays and their family. The family is really highly involved and wants what's best for their child. But there's those ongoing challenges in aligning expectations, communication, and long-term planning. So during this IFSP development, and if for people that are on the call that may not know what IFSP stands for, it's the Individualized Family Service Plan, similar to the IEP, Individualized Education Plan. So during this development, the family has identified goals that might not be appropriately developmentally for this child. And it's creating tension between honoring the family's priorities and setting achievable and meaningful outcomes. So the team is also navigating sensitive conversations, including how to discuss developmental concerns, possible diagnoses, and the child's progress when milestones are not being met. Additional complexities include that these caregivers are at different stages of understanding and acceptance. So mom is at a different stage than dad is, and as well as grandparents are also involved in this. And so all the family members are on different stages. And there's some denial and pushback around that. This is also occurring, like Myrna just mentioned, family and marital issues. So this particular family or families that we've worked with are going through some separation or might even lead to divorce, and they have differing perspective on goals. So as the child grows, the team is really thinking about how do we support these families in understanding and using developmental milestones to guide expectations and planning, revisit important topics such as guardianship or the DSPD waitlist waiver when earlier opportunities may have been missed, build caregiver confidence in skills for advocating for their child across settings over time, and how do we help prepare the family for future needs. So the team is really kind of get some guidance on how to balance family-centered practice with professional recommendations, communicate clearly and compassionately during this kind of situation. We're all back now, Leo, right? Okay, so we're gonna start with Chris's group. I don't know who took notes or who's doing your call out.
I took notes, but Chris, if you wanted to say something, you're more than welcome to.
No, Tori, I'll let you kind of summarize what we talked about. We've had a lot of good discussion.
We did have a lot of good discussion. I honestly felt like over 2 pages worth of notes, so it was really fun. Um, so we had question 1 and question 2, which kind of talked about like balancing like the family's priorities while like setting appropriate and achievable goals, and also like how to have conversations, respectful conversations with families who may not be ready to hear about like developmental concerns or diagnoses that their child is getting. So kind of overall in that conversation, obviously we have a lot of really great recommendations and suggestions, but we talked a lot about how to actively like support the parent where they are. And oftentimes that's not going to be where we want to go with that child or where we think it's going to be best to start. So we talked about like asking open-ended questions and really gaining that parent's experience and insight into their child. We talked a lot about like the partnership between early interventionist and parent, each bringing that like expert perspective, whether that's on like development or whether that's on the child into the conversation, and really creating that open and vulnerable space where you can build a bond, where they trust you and they're open, where you can actually help the child regardless of where that parent wants to start. I think that was kind of our big overview. Some more recommendations that we had. Let me see if I can find something that's more specific than that. I think we mainly talked about the specific, like the general stuff rather than specifics, although we did have a good conversation partway through about how to help divorced families where you have 2 different households coming into the picture. And so with that one, we also had really great recommendations. I wanted to highlight is like finding commonalities like meal times. I thought that was a great one because like both parents, regardless of what they do, have to feed their child. So if you can create routines around like that you can share with both parents, it makes it easier to bridge that gap regardless of the marital status or how the parents feel about each other. So that's just a brief insight into my notes, but I'm happy to share them to the Canvas page later so everyone can have more.
Great. Those are great ideas and thoughts. All right. I'm not sure if Eric is back, so I'm going to call on Marla because you were also in Eric's group.
We had some notes from our group discussion. That was good. So we talked about the experience that some of the parents have. One shared an experience of what a preschool teacher said, I'm noticing some sensory processing, and just gently suggested that the mom might be overwhelmed with some of what she's seeing, and maybe she should seek a diagnosis of ASD, which was a really helpful way that parent said that was really helpful to have that gentle suggestions there. The other thing that was really helpful was that she had the next step ready for that parent to say, here's the way to seek this diagnosis. So already going there. Some of the parents suggested a straight shooting would be helpful as well, to just be open and clear with that. And one of the best things you can do if you're doing some straight shooting with parents is to say, nothing's wrong with that. The best news that you'll get back is if they say nothing's wrong. Or the best news you'll get back may also be, this is what is needed and you can do it. So there's both sides of that are both really helpful things. And we had a suggestion that if we don't tiptoe around it, the parents won't feel like they have to tiptoe around it too, and that we can help with that way. We had a suggestion that as we point out what's really going well first, and then point out areas that may need help, that's a way to be positive on those things. And we talked about some of the screeners that we use, from the ASQ to the CDC checklist, and another one that I didn't write down. And what we gather from those milestones. And then we talked about, how do we get that bigger picture from, what's happening with the family. And one of the things that was brought up was we need to look at their culture, whether it's their religion or what culture they're from, what beliefs they have, and is that something that they are working on. So we need to share what development looks like. And that may be different expectations in different cultures. Or so eye contact, for example, may be a different expectation depending on what culture I'm from. But then we also emphasize that it's important to encourage parents to go with their gut. If they're sensing something isn't right, then have them encourage them to keep asking.
Great points too. And I love it. That's a lot of the same thing that our group really talked about, is meeting parents where they're at and helping them get to that next thing. A few of the things that were good reminders in our group that I thought were helpful is Dakota really mentioned helping parents remember what their rights are, and not just handing them the booklet, but really letting them know that they can advocate a lot for what is going on in their education plan. And then Ashley gave a great recommendation of breaking down the resources. So here's 3 small ones that you could do right now, and then let's check back in so that the parents aren't overwhelmed. Somebody, Tori, you guys mentioned in your group about that the parents all have to feed their child, and that was somebody else shared that too, of like, here's what it looks like with mom, and here's what it looks like with dad. What's that common things that happen with it? So really some great discussions in our group. Amy, you came off mute. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to it?
You highlighted a lot of the ones that I was picking out of my notes. So you pretty much knocked them all off. So
great. Well, that was a great discussion. And like I said, I think we all know a family or a situation that was pretty similar to that case. So you can always go back and review those. Our next session will be August 3rd, where we're going to be talking about inclusion versus accessibility. Kelly Hess from the Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice will be presenting to us. If any of you have a case or some questions that you would like us to all discuss, please reach out to the Disability Echo email at usu.edu, and we'll get you set up, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you all.